But I want to tell you a story about a cold February night, New York City. John Walton is binge watching episode or season 2 of House of Cards. And he decides to take a break and log on to an aviation forum to reconnect with some of his colleagues back in Australia, where he was a reporter for a travel magazine there. And they're doing this sort of aviation geek thing, watching flight patterns, listening to the air traffic control signal. And it becomes clear that one airline, one plane, has gone off course and is flying to a different destination. And as they listen in, they hear the air traffic controllers talk about the pilot wanting asylum. And it becomes pretty clear to these aviation geeks that this plane is being hijacked. Now, John is a journalist, but he doesn't have a printing press. He doesn't have a broadcast signal. He doesn't even have much of a website. But he does have a Twitter account with 3,000 followers. So he tweeted this: the Ethiopian Airlines 767 has been hijacked and is currently circling over Lake Geneva. That was factually correct, and he broke this news. Now, John isn't the first person to break news on Twitter. We see that a lot. In fact, anyone with a smartphone and a Twitter account or social media account has the ability now to post some news happening. These are 2 iconic examples: the aircraft landing on the Hudson, the crash at SFO. I'm not sure what the correlation is between breaking news and airline tragedies, but there seems to be one. And these are what we've come to refer to as citizen journalists. I think they happen to just be eyes on the street at the time that something happened, but they are very disruptive to us as journalists because they're doing our job of breaking stories. Now, to compete with that urgency, we've seen traditional news organizations begin to go to or turn to Twitter and other social media to announce their breaking news. And so I follow the hashtag breaking, and we find that a lot of organizations will use this to talk about stories as they emerge, often as a pointer to news that they're covering either in their broadcast studios, on their newspapers, on their digital sites. But I think that ET702, as the hashtag became known, is something different. And so I want to talk about that a little bit this morning and hopefully incite some conversation along the way. Because what I think ET702 really represents is one of the first and best use cases for real-time social journalism. It's not about a citizen on the scene who happens to tweet or post a photo, but it's about a journalist who applied real reporting, effectively creating a virtual newsroom among his aviation geeks in that forum to track and follow a story and then to report it out in real time. So what does real-time social media look like? Yesterday, David used the term atomic. I think of it as molecular. Maybe I was not as good in chemistry, so somebody will help with the differentiation here. But to me, molecular means that it combines and recombines to grow and take shape. And so within the story, within real-time social journalism, those series of elements, the facts that David talked about, the photos, the bits of data, recombine in a way to allow the story to grow. It also allows for the journalist to reach out to other sources and other resources to bring context to the story. And so in that way, by combining and recombining elements, you create this molecular social journalism. It's probably a blinding flash of the obvious, but it is unfolding and it is time-released. It is, by definition, we don't know where this story is going. We do not have all the facts. So we're releasing information as it becomes known to us, which requires social journalism to be iterative and self-correcting. It's not just enough to put a straight stream out and to continue to put data into the stream, but the story has to circle back on itself. We need to use mechanisms that help our readers know where we are, know what we know, and perhaps even give some clue as to where we're going. And we have to use those same iterative techniques to make sure that we're correcting. It is not enough to remove a tweet, and there's some argument about whether you should take misinformation out of the stream, but rather to use mechanisms to denote corrections, to connote updates, to give our, again, readers a chance to figure out what they knew and what they now know in this iterative process. I think real-time social journalism is also both renegade and disciplined. It's renegade in that it's going to force us to think really differently about how we report. It's going to force us to use tools that we may not be comfortable with, and it's going to force us in our newsrooms to invent new process. And we're going to break a lot of rules along the way to get to this point. But at the same time, it has to be very disciplined. We have to hold true to the standards and ethics of journalism, to the policies and practices we have as good reporters to make sure that we are producing a credible product. And I think that becomes increasingly important, and certainly in light of some of the information around credibility that Laura shared, which is that at each point across, say, the last 50 years, when we have had more media, our credibility as journalists have dropped. So in the 70s, when we saw the rise of cable news, we lost 20 points of credibility. In mid-2004 or 5, when social media brought all kinds of bloggers and others into the format, brought potentially non-journalists posing as real new media companies, another 20 points. And I think that real-time social journalism gives us the opportunity to reclaim that credibility, but only if we do that as disciplined and ethical journalists, because the very nature of social media is that it is transparent. So again, it'll force us to open up some of our practices and become more transparent, more open to our audiences. Then lastly, I think real-time social journalism is about audience above and before platform. And we've had lots of conversations about mobile first or is it audience first, and I think social journalism really is about audience first. It's about us reaching our audiences wherever they are in the format that they are most easily and able to receive it. Us going out and meeting the audience rather than waiting for them to come to us or trying to take what we do and shove it into a format because that's the popular platform at the moment. So organically, this idea of real-time social journalism is already taking shape. And I just pulled this from yesterday, and it's really fuzzy on this big screen. But this reporter, using the hashtag breaking, was identifying a local official who had resigned. It's all she knew about it. She's not pointing to some other story, but rather putting out for her audience, this thing has happened. And then a short time later, getting additional information, now using the hashtag developing, she's talking about more details around the story. And while this is growing organically, I think there are some things that we need to do to help make social journalism a reality. And a lot of that is my work right now with RJI, and fortunately with Tom Warhover's great capstone class, who are 24 eager seniors doing a lot of the legwork right now. First of all, it's better tools. There are a lot of great tools for social media, and yet they are designed for different and distinct purposes. In combination, those tools are very helpful, but we haven't really put together the tool set or the suite of tools and applications that will help us bring process and discipline to this practice. And so what we're working with, one of the groups in the capstone, is now reaching out to news organizations and talking to them about what would it take, what do you need, what are your processes in your newsroom that would help you tap into the social stream as a resource and publish out into it as a means of reaching your audience, and then how do you measure that impact? So we're working with those teams, and I would encourage any of you who get excited about this topic, and I hope I can get some of you to be in the next 9 minutes and 40 seconds, to join in that conversation. We'd love to have some of our students talk to you and understand what you're doing now with social media in your newsrooms as a news reporting vehicle, and what you need so that you can do that job better. we would love to be able to document that as part of our basically market requirements document for a new set of tools. The second thing we need to do is really understand what our current and future best practices are. What does it mean to create a credible platform and a credible stream of news using social tools? And to that end, I developed, kind of as a prototype, commontags.org. Commontags.org is a site that is meant to bring together our community for discussion about the tags that are working, the tags that don't, try to build consensus, show examples, with the goal of creating a kind of style book or lexicon about using best practices and best tagging practices for the social journalism molecules that will help our readers understand where we are, understand where the story is, understand how to consume and be better news consumers at the end of the day. So in this case, I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go to commontags.org. There are a number of tags we've seeded it with. Would love your great examples of where it's working, where it's not working, what you would do differently, your recommendations and suggestions, because that's only going to help make it all better for everyone. So why is now the right time for real-time social journalism? No big surprise to you. Social technologies have profoundly disrupted our business. We are in a world of hurt. And if we don't figure out how to look at this problem as a challenge that we can wrap our arms around, embrace and leverage, we're not going to get out of that hurt anytime soon. But paradoxically, I think that this disruption that has been created is now the greatest opportunity for us to find new audiences, reach new audiences, develop new business models, and regain our credibility as journalists in the marketplace, which is the issue of trust, right? And I said before, we're seeing that diminishing. I think by embracing a more transparent form of communication, a more transparent platform, we have that opportunity to rebuild our trust. And then finally, when we live in a world, as we do today, where anyone with a cell phone and a Twitter account can be a reporter, and anyone who has an opinion can be an op-eds editor, can comment on the work we do, we have to think about where and how we play in every chain, every link in the value chain of information. And so it's not enough anymore to be a reporter in old forms of media. We have to think about what new tools we use and how reporting changes. It's not enough to just give the news, we have to create context for the news. And so I think real-time social journalism is a way for us to establish ourselves in the value chain in ways that are, again, will build new value and bring our audiences back to us in really meaningful ways and in ways that really create community. So that's my pitch for real-time social journalism. I know many of you are using Twitter and Facebook as a platform, often as a marketing platform for your other content. But I would love to I hope, host a bit of a discussion here in the next 5 minutes about how you are or aren't using it. And I think one of the challenges, and someone mentioned it yesterday, is how do we really step back and reinvent who we are? If we didn't have our printing presses and our broadcast channels and our various resources to get news out into the world, what would we do? How would we do that? And I think that's a big leap for us to get over. But if we can begin that conversation and begin those experiments now, I think we're going to find that this disruption is actually one of the best things to happen to our industry in a long time, because it will allow us to recreate ourselves for that millennial generation who will be our customers going forward. So that's the pitch, and I'd love to entertain conversation.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
Are there any examples you can point to where a reporter is clued on breaking news by an audience member, like an individual on the plane crashes, and then that starts a back and forth collaboration between the news organization and the audience member who broke the news?
Yeah, so John Walton's a great example of that. Although he is a journalist, he's a freelance writer and an aviation expert, he became the source for mainstream publications on 5 continents, delivering stories the next morning. And he has, John is, it's that John, @thatjohn on Twitter, and through that you'll be able to find his About Me page, and through that you'll find an article he wrote on Medium, which kind of was a dissection of what happened. And he talks a lot in it in terms of lessons learned about how media organizations reached out to him and how they created that collaboration, what worked and what didn't work. So that would be the best, at least today, documented resource that I know of to explore that further.
Yeah, Chris, I have a question also. You talked about transparency, and I'm with you on that. I think that's really important, whether it's television news or Twitter or wherever. But one of the questions, or one of the things that I guess I worry about, and I'm kind of curious about your position on this, is that because social media, there's such a rush to get information out, and we do make mistakes, and we want to correct them, but at the same time, we're really trying to maintain that credibility. So I've heard a lot of debate in a lot of newsrooms about, well, don't worry about it. If we're wrong, we're just going to correct it. And that's okay because the audience is going to accept that. I feel a little bit uncomfortable with that. That's one of those things I'm uncomfortable with, that we're moving so fast to get information out there and be the one breaking the stories, and we're accepting it. How do you respond to that? What do you think is the right level of, being fast or being right? I think being right is more important, but it's a debate.
It's the renegade and disciplined, right? We need to move quickly about what we know, but we can't put garbage out. You can't put garbage in the pipeline, sewage in the pipeline, and expect it's going to be a pretty package at the other end. And I think there's a lot of debate about that. I wrote a post a week or so ago about the need for speed and volume actually getting in the way of us doing a good job. And I think that's really about a discipline that allows us to say, you know what, my job here is to serve a readership that I want to trust me. And if I put garbage out, I can't guarantee, even using the best practices of common tags or other resources, that they're going to see the correction. And we've seen that again and again in social media, where misinformation, it goes viral just as well, sometimes even more so than fact. So I think we have to lean on the side of correct, our ethics, right, and that discipline. And maybe there is some consequence to that in the short term, but I think in the long term it pays off.
Chris, there are some organizations working on kind of a closed ecosystem for real-time journalism. I think of Dave's work with Circa. A lot of sites are trying to do their own live real-time blogging. But it's in a closed environment where they can control the information going into it. In the example of social, where there's a hashtag that everyone's using, we can't control the information other people are putting into that hashtag. So how do we find that balance of making sure that the accuracy, the validity, and frankly, the business model work for a journalist in those two different environments? Yeah,
my impulse is to say we have to surrender the illusion of control and really just follow our best practices. And I look at the breaking hashtag, and again, I follow that. Well, yesterday, I would, as I was following the stream, I would say 1 in 5 stories was actually breaking, and another 1 in 5 was, let me show you something we just put on our website. And then 3 of them were just, let me show you stuff like the community calendar. Now, I don't know of any community calendar that's breaking news, with all due respect to community calendars. So I think part of that is then calling out. I was kind of debating with my own self about retweeting, are you nuts? That's not breaking. Do we become, and I don't know, does a voice of the community come up and really try to correct those behaviors? I don't know the answer. But I think we have to, again, surrender the illusion of control. That's the biggest challenge around social generally.
I don't have a microphone, so I hope you can hear me okay. So a lot of what you talked about today was incorporating audience feedback. A lot of what you talked about today was incorporating the audience and having that conversation, using social for your news sources and establish relationships on that end. But we also learned yesterday that it's largely being used right now, Twitter, for example, for pushing out your own content, and secondarily, to talk to other journalists. So how would you recommend sort of we try to change that equation so it is about that audience and conversation news gathering?
Hey, what's the line, enough about me, what do you think about me? Right. That's how we use social media now, right? Let me tell you more about me, and then you can tell me something about me by retweeting what I already said about me. We have to really start to engage in conversations and really embrace the fact that dialogue is a multi-directional conversation. And I think that, again, is the best practice. Is that if we commit to those and we execute on those, we can create a stronger relationship with our audience. We have had hundreds of years of, I said so, so you read it, you listen to it. And now I think we have to move to a modality that says, I said so, what do you think? Well, here's what I think, let's have a discussion. Great, I know I'm getting the high sign. Thank you very much.
Chris Shipley.